And welcome back to the Ologies. I'm Ross Blankenship, here with Clint Bruce. Today we're doing BookOLOGY.
BookOLOGY. Hey, you know who's not here?
Who?
Lil Sweet.
You know who is here?
Terry Gemas.
Oh my gosh, we're so stoked to have him back.
We
Terry,
are.
Thanks for coming back.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Good
I
to be
told
here.
Bill that I told Lil Sweet we moved our corporate headquarters again.
Again?
Yeah.
Okay. So
He's somewhere. He's probably near Tulsa now. Yeah, he'll be back. He'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Send him to the Comanche Nuclear site was pretty.
Yeah.
Something about a cavity search. I don't know. It was interesting.
The fact that he went there.
Yeah, man. Listen, he's a go-getter. We just got to keep telling him to go different places. So we're going to do BookOLOGY today.
We
and
are.
one of the reasons we're going to do BookOLOGY is before we started recording Surgeryology, which was awesome.
Right.
And such a big thing that we know we're going to have to do multiple sessions of Surgeryology. I mentioned a book, and Terry started talking about a book that he'd read, and you obviously, I know you read a ton of books, and
Right.
and I read a book. I mean, I think my books are different. I buy a book, then I listen to it on audio.
Right. Dr. Seuss genre.
Yeah, I mean, green eggs and ham.
There's a lot of good stuff in there.
But so we want to do on this very first BookOLOGY, we want to talk about kind of why, the role the books have played in our lives. And then the question I want to ask you guys is, the concept of books are so big. It's almost like, hey, who's your favorite mentor? I'm like, man, I've had nothing but mentors. So
Sure.
we got to thin slice this thing, right? So I want to talk about historical books,
Yeah.
either his history or historical fiction.
Yeah.
Like the one that's sitting on
Yeah, I got
your
one right
desk
in front
now.
of me, Gates of Fire.
What is that one?
This is Gates of Fire. One second, though. Let me tell you.
Sure.
There's a feeling that you get when you read that last page
Yeah.
that leads to a small bout of depression whenever a book
Yeah.
is truly
A
Absolutely.
little bit of
wonderful.
melancholy.
You
when it,
don't want it to end.
Yeah.
And that, for me, has always been kind of the point where I'm like, you know what, that was a very good book.
Yeah.
Not trying to skim through.
I never really thought about that. I mean, I've experienced it, but I've never acknowledged it as evidence of a great book.
Sure. It's like the character in a movie or a TV show that you hate. Well, he's doing his job.
Right.
You're supposed to hate him. And
And you're throwing heat today.
I'm coming with it hard.
Ross on fuego.
Yeah.
That is the classic, though, example of a great book. When you you don't want it to end. And you know it's going to end because you're looking at the pages and you're like,
Yeah, it's
I got
tangible.
3 pages left or
Yeah.
whatever. And it's like when it ends, for me, a great book, I walk around for 24 hours kind of like a zombie. Kind
Yeah.
of like, man, what am
Thinking
I going to
about
read
it.
now?
'Cause
When
you
am I
were
going to
invested- 'cause
find
you
a
were
book that's
invested
going to be
in
as
that
good as
story.
that one?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, it's great. Yeah.
And then exactly, outdoing it. It's like my dad always said, we have a good dog, a dog died. You can't replace it. You can't just go pick up the next great book.
Yeah.
Right.
The book that I have in front of me is Gates of Fire. This is one that was really pushed on us when I was in the 173rd. As the movie 300 came out,
Yeah.
this book kind of supplemented it. I'm not sure. I'm sure it came out
I think
before.
300. I think 300 told a dramatic version of, but they're not the same. You got to read Gates of Fire. I mean,
Yeah, you
Gates
really
of
do.
Fire
Yeah.
is about. It is an amazing book, not just on leadership, but on how unit. So Pressfield writes amazing historical fiction, and there's 3 books, and for me, I call them the trilogy. You have Gates of Fire, then you have the Afghan campaign, and then you have Virtues of War. And each of those books tell the story of success and elite pursuits through a different perspective. So Gates of Fire is about the unit. Afghan campaign is about the boys, like the guys that are, is like Ross in Afghanistan. And Virtues of War was about Alexander, about the leader. And what I think Pressfield does so amazingly, he tells you the beautiful brutality of each of those roles, right? It's fascinating. But Gates of Fire was the one that, if you were in the military, or you were in any kind of kinetic unit, any kind of direct action unit,
Right.
you were either strongly encouraged or straight up told to read Gates of Fire, or you did it on your own because you saw it in the hands of the guys you wanted to be like.
Right. Well, one of the things that they do in this book is they go into the coming of age of these soldiers. All the things that they were made to do to earn their right of passage into this great army. And some of the things I found myself like, wow, that's amazing.
Pretty savage.
It's very savage. It's probably the best adjective to describe it. And I'll give one example of they would line these boys up and they would hit them like you were hitting tackling dummies at Navy, Clint, and try and a tree. and they would not have to knock that tree down. No nothing.
Yep.
No pads, no nothing. Just.
So I'm the one of the three of us that have not read it.
Okay.
So without giving me the punchline of the book so it doesn't ruin it for me, tell me something that's going to sell me to read it.
So I will tell you, it is the most immersive description of Thermopylae and the Battle of 300 and the context of these things. But what I think makes Gates of Fire amazing is, and Pressfield does this really well, he talks about the totality of it. It's not just the fighting. As a matter of fact, in the scheme of the book, the fighting is maybe 30% of the book, maybe.
Yeah.
The forging and then the heartbreak and all these other things. I'll tell you how profound this book is for me. It's one of the reasons I love books and movies and music, because sometimes these people just say what I don't know how to say yet. And Ross, I think you've even heard me say this. I need to be around people who get what I don't know how to say till I figure it out. Where there's a sequence in that book, and when I read it the first time, I found a payphone. I was on my way overseas, and I found a payphone. I called my wife, and I said, "Babe, I got to read this to you because I don't know how to say this, but this is how I feel." And there's a part of the book, and I read it. I officiated the marriage of one of our great friends' son, who's also a Navy SEAL, and I read this excerpt from the book at their wedding. It was in their wedding, and but it's a moment where Leonidas is talking to the wife of one of the generals that he sent, and he also sends her son. And I don't want to spoil it, but it's not what you anticipate reading. When you think of Sparta, this is the king's answer of what makes Sparta great is not perhaps what the world would think would make Sparta great, but the king's vote matters, right?
Right.
And the other thing when it talks about forging Spartan warriors, one of the other things that was equally as important as your fighting skill was your appreciation for beauty, the condition of your hair, your ability to write poetry, your ability to be quick-witted, and all these other things.
Well-rounded in a sense.
It was very deliberate to counterpoint the brutality of war with beauty. And in spite of all the savagery inside of their development as warriors, there was an absolute mandate that you appreciated beauty because they knew that's the counterpoint of the soul, is beauty.
The culture that you're speaking about really brings rise to the plot because these men were knew that they were marching off to certain death.
Yeah, without question.
Yeah, say again?
Without question.
Without question, and that's what gets it for me, is you've got 300, and I think that number is not correct. I think it was
it was the Spartan number that's generally correct.
Yeah.
Now the Athenians and there were more Greece responded.
Yes.
These different city-states, but they were led by the Spartans.
Right.
And the Spartans' number was 300.
So they were marching off to certain defeat, but they were there on principle.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Anything less would have been a stain on the reputation, which, as Clint's alluded to, was not going to happen with men of these caliber.
Right.
And so when we read this book, I think it was to kind of put us in a mindset of, to do your job.
Yeah.
Like a Bill Belichick quote: "Do your job, have some pride in your country, and show no cowardice."
And also, I'm just, tell me if I'm correct on this, but it's kind of like you're going into the unknown, but what matters most is how you represent where you came from.
Yep.
And whether you live or die, you have to do it with some pride.
And these guys were going into the horrific known.
Yeah.
Like they knew. I mean, and so one of the conditions to be selected is you had to have a son. And so if Leonidas picked you had to have a son. You had to have an offspring,
so
right? Because you weren't coming back, right?
Yeah.
And so that's an example of historical fiction, and I think Pressfield is perhaps one of our most gifted historical fiction
I'm
authors.
going out to get that book.
And get Afghan Campaign and Virtues of War as well. But let me go around the room real quick and talk about a historical book, either historical fiction or just pure historical study that was really relevant to you. Terry, I'll start with you.
Well, there's three that come to mind, and I know with limited time I'll probably just talk about one. But I know we talked about what three we would pick. I'm going to change mine a little bit. Yeah. But this book, I think that'll grip a lot of people, is one called A Higher Calling, or it might be A Higher Call. I think it's A Higher Calling. And what it's about is it's depicted in World War II. Mm-hmm. And picture this, if you will. the battle over Germany, when our boys were flying from England over to Germany.
I know,
and
I know which book you're talking about. This is incredible.
I don't.
I know the story.
Yeah,
I don't know the book. But I know the story.
They were flying a B-24. I think the B-24s they were flying. And basically, this B-24 with its whole crew gets just obliterated to the point that it's still flying, but basically it's like a convertible almost flying back to England. It's still over Germany, but flying back towards England.
Okay.
And so obliterated that there's essentially like no door for the pilot.
Yeah,
you
it is
see the
minimally
pilot.
airworthy.
Yeah.
Minimally airworthy. Well, this German fighter pilot comes upon it, and the German fighter pilot is looking eye to eye with the pilot of this American plane.
Sure.
And
the fighter pilot is up there to shoot down American bombers.
And that's what I was just going to say.
job.
He has to shoot them down.
Oh, yeah.
If he goes back and he didn't shoot down, he gets court-martialed himself and gets thrown in the brig.
Wolves were
he has to shoot him down. And he looked at that pilot. The pilot looked at him, and the pilot, American pilot, later tells a story that, hey, I was assuming he was going to shoot me. I mean, it's like, that's what you do, you know. Well, this guy, this German, and again, it's called a higher calling because he was a real religious man, even though he wanted to shoot down Americans, but he looked at that and he said, he showed mercy on that pilot and did not shoot it down. And his rationale was sort of like, well, they've got 3 hours to go across the English channel or whatever it was that they're flying across. And it's like, he ain't going to make it anyhow. You know, he's not going to make it. So I'm going to let him go.
Well, he flew alongside him.
He flew alongside for a while.
He provided a little bit of an air escort.
Almost like a cover. Yeah, he actually did. And then, so he took off. So the book, basically, in general, it chronicles the rest of the war for this German fighter pilot, and then the rest of the war for the American, because they made it back. And,
oh wow!
And the ending of the book is like 40 years later, they found each other and had a reunion.
Oh wow!
And so
when they lived the rest, I mean, they traveled together. They became dear friends. They lived the last season of their lives together.
Something like that, because the German fighter pilot ended up moving to America.
Yeah,
and they found each other.
Wasn't it like it's in Canada?
Actually, one of them, I think the German he ended up living in Seattle, and then the American was in Florida, and they had a reunion.
It was amazing.
And they actually have this on videotape. You can YouTube it. But but long story short, that's one of my favorite stories. Now I've read, actually, to be honest with you, I've read maybe a little bit better books, but I'll kind of pass it off to one of you guys.
What about you, Ross?
I'm gonna have to go with The Art of War.
Yeah,
Sun Tzu.
Sun Tzu.
Yeah. That's the correct pronunciation. I read that book before I joined the military, and
on your own, just
yeah, absolutely. And basically what I took from it was a book of principles that are ubiquitous in the sense that that they applied then, and they apply now,
and they apply off the battlefield.
They're gonna apply always,
everywhere.
Big props for ubiquitous.
Yeah, always have the high ground.
Yeah.
Whenever you are bedding down for the night, make sure that you're close to water, but not too close.
Mm-hmm.
Always have scouts out. Knowing when to push your men, the gas pedal and the brake. Robert E. Lee, one of the greatest generals in the history of the world, I don't care what side you're on, was a big fan and employed a lot of these principles.
Yeah.
And actually, it was said that his Robert E. Lee's wounded wagon train behind him was 12 miles long, and he cried. Anyway, but Sun Tzu's The Art of War really helped prep me. And then I realized when I got into the military that a lot of the guys had read that book or were in the course of reading that book. I asked my first team leader, I said, have you read Sun Tzu's The Art of War? He said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of, I don't know if it's kind of, it's like, did everyone that had inclination?
Well, at the Service Academy, it's mandatory. Like you read, you read it. You read von Clausewitz's Fog of War and Sun Tzu. And I mean, listen, when you go to a Service Academy, you've declared your profession as the profession of combat and war, right? And so there's these tomes that are critical and absolute, and you are ill-equipped to lead if you have not just simply read them, but studied them and debated them and conversed them and applied them through the lens of history and projected them forward in scenarios you might find yourself in.
I would agree with that thinking. You know, that you probably should read this book. You know, there are principles in this book that you're going to need to understand, that you're going to have a firm grasp on, and they might change a little bit over time, right? But at the same time, they're all very valid points. So that's the one that got me. And then I'm going to add a little extra one on killing. If y'all haven't read that one, pick it up. It's about Vietnam and men's natural aversion to predisposition to killing.
Grossman.
Yeah,
Grossman.
And how they get over it via the training and via the environment that they're in. It's phenomenal. I love that book. I've read it several times.
He reads on combat too is another one of his.
Okay.
So basically, one of the things he talks about on killing was really understanding killing and really understanding. You know, there's these amazing percentages of, especially on the World War I and trench warfare, and they reverse engineered accuracy. On hey, we had this many people shooting and this many casualties, which means either we trained the most horrible marksman in the world, or our soldiers are deliberately missing, right?
There,
and it doesn't. One of the things I respect about On Killing is it doesn't celebrate it. It doesn't glorify it. It talks about it almost as though you're reading a medical journal.
Yeah, I was going
right?
to say, is it more technical?
As a surgeon, it's interesting. In order to heal the body, you got to break the body, right? There's a juxtaposition of those things, right? And so On Killing is written almost in a medical sense, is that in order to end war, you have to fight war very well, very quickly, very aggressively. Right. Otherwise, it goes on too long. And so if the purpose of war is to achieve an objective, and in order to achieve that objective, you have to kill the other side's people, then we need to understand how to kill very aggressively so that we can be done with war.
Yeah. Does it talk about the more you kill, just the how you break people's spirits?
Yeah,
and that's how you end it faster too.
They talk about that, the conditioning of it.
Yeah.
Let me put that on hold. Gettysburg, they went and picked up all the rifles afterwards, and they found rifles that had been loaded 5, 6, 7 times and never shot. With On Killing, that was in the Vietnam War, where we're fighting an adversary. But with the Civil War, we're fighting Americans. And despite the fact that we were a nation divided at the time, there was a sense of camaraderie there. Yeah. There was a sense of family. I'm sure some of those guys faced off to one another, but I found that very interesting and something that you couldn't, that they probably weren't calculating. You would think, hey, load, make ready, fire. You know, a lot of those guys didn't. They just act like they did, and they loaded another round and continued that.
There's a guy named Jim Hornfisher. He helped write Marcus's second book, Service, and I got to know him really well. And he's a naval historian, and like Last of the Tin Can Soldiers and some of the Navy naval history. Naval history is fascinating to me. Obviously, the institution I graduated from, but man, the ocean, you've got two enemies at all time when you're on the ocean. The ocean's an enemy you can't beat. And
Sharks.
You have whoever you're
Sharks
fighting,
are one.
right? So you're contending with two adversaries at any time because you can't get the ocean on your side. You just got to understand what she's going to do. The ocean's going to win.
Yeah.
And so there's an element of vigilance and creativity and risk that the function of war at sea is. And some of that Hornfisher stuff is amazing.
Absolutely.
BookOLOGY. Just when you tune into the channel, you'll see a lot of these BookOLOGYs because I think all three of us are pretty profoundly affected
in addition
by
to
books.
Serial Killers Part 3. So y'all stay tuned for that.
Excited about that one.
Yeah,
Let's
right.
go ahead and
take a cold shower after that. Hey guys, appreciate it. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see y'all next time.
Next time.